that right now. Professor Hansford, welcome. It's you know. All right, this is a wonderful, wonderful day in the life of the Howard University School of Law. I have to say, on a personal level, it's rare that you get to meet your heroes. And I shared with Justice Sachs that when I was a law student, just like you all, I guess I was once a law student myself, my mentor, Charles Ogletree, introduced me to Justice Sachs, and he taught me all about his extraordinary work, his service, his sacrifice, his legacy. And when I finally got the chance myself to travel to South Africa, and I went to Johannesburg, and I got to go to the Constitutional Court, I made it a point to stand behind the seat in which Justice Sachs sat as he served on that court, and to share that picture with Professor Ogletree, who has now left us. He passed a couple of years ago, but it was a full circle moment for me. And I'm so thrilled that our students and our colleagues and our special guests are here to join in this moment. Now, this event came into fruition through a collaboration. And I have to say, I was just at a reception during Congressional Black Caucus weekend and meeting lots of great folks. And one of those phenomenal folks was Professor Jean Bailey, who said, I have an idea. And this was at a cocktail reception. You know, people say those things all the time, right? I have an idea, maybe we can do this. And that was like 10 days ago. and look where we are. And that's a testament to Professor Bailey, who you're going to hear from momentarily. Also, I'd like to announce the Howard University Republic of South Africa project. I'd like to acknowledge Tara Hammonds, who may not be here, but I know contributed greatly to this event. The Center for African Studies and the South African Embassy. And I'd like to acknowledge Councilor Hasbrook for being here with us on behalf of the Embassy of the Republic of South Africa. I would also like to thank our students for coming, and particularly Abby Olafa. Where is Abby over here? And Nahab Fambule, I don't know, is Nahab here? Yes. Thank you for being here from the Hustle African Law Students Association. So, Professor Jean Bailey is a graduate professor of human development here at Howard University, where she also serves as chair of the Howard University Republic of South Africa project. She's a respected scholar. She's an advocate for international collaboration, and she truly has been instrumental in advancing educational and cultural partnerships between the United States and the continent of Africa. She serves as co-chair of the USA African National Congress Committee and was appointed by President Barack Obama to the President's Advisory Committee on the Arts for the Kennedy Center. In addition, she's a member of the Maryland Commission on African Affairs, where she continues to champion cross-cultural engagement, global education, and the arts. Without further ado, Professor Jean Bailey.
Thank you, Dean Fairfax, can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, Dean Fairfax. It's a pleasure to meet you and to thank you for responding to my plea during the reception. But we had been working on this event for several weeks, and we definitely wanted to have it here at Howard University Law School. So I never miss an opportunity to take advantage of this, the presence of the dean. So I want to say first, good afternoon to everyone. And just to say that I really am honored to welcome Justice Sachs. When my friend Ann, who is with Shared Interest in Atlanta, which Shared Interest is in Baltimore, reached out to me to see if we would be interested in helping to host Justice Sachs' visit to Washington. I said, wow. And then, of course, I was just humbled and honored that I would have the opportunity to actually host and meet this towering figure in the global struggle for justice. His life and work really embodied the enduring spirit from when he was a teenager of the resistance, reconciliation, and human dignity. So as we gather here in his presence, we are reminded that the fight against apartheid in South Africa and the civil rights movement here in the United States were not isolated struggles, but deeply interconnected chapters in a shared global narrative of liberation. From the streets of Montgomery to the townships of Soweto, activists on both continents drew strength from one another, exchanging strategies, solidarity, and a vision of freedom that transcended the borders. So we're happy that Justice Sachs is here to kind of share his recollections of the interaction between the US and South Africa in those struggles. I am humbled also to be in this position. Maybe it's just because of longevity, because many of the people who started out on this project, the Howard University South Africa project, are really no longer with us. But I happened to have been present, and maybe there are a few others, when in 1994, I guess Ziad was here, President Mandela came to Howard and spoke at Howard. He chose Howard as the first university where he would give a major speech after release from prison. And he came, first of all, to thank us for our role in contributing to the liberation of South Africa. But at that time, he acknowledged that while we had the liberation of the struggle was not over, and he invited Howard University, the Board of Trustees, the students, faculty, as well as others in the US, to assist South Africa in the transformation to a real democratic society. And so our Board of Trustees, Trustee Frank Savage was the chair. He recently passed away. And then President Swigert, they took on that mantle, and I happened to have been a faculty trustee at the time and had the opportunity to join that delegation. And when we returned from that delegation, we decided to form the Howard University Republic of South Africa project. And Dean English at the time was the dean. We had administrators and faculty on the delegation, but Dean English said, this needs to be a faculty-driven effort. And so we formed the Howard South Africa project, which was a combination of administrators, etc. And that, the rest is history. That gave us an opportunity to forge relationships with the Embassy of South Africa, to provide continuity across ambassadors and all of the relationships with South Africa. So we are really happy that the struggle continues, that we are continuing to get more and more involved. And we're happy to have our younger faculty members like Dr. Johnson, who now heads the Africa Center, and is a member of the African Studies faculty, to be here to continue as Dean Fairfax mentioned, we have several many partners. I want to recognize the individuals who are here with us today from our team. Daphne Titus, who works with us on our America's Voices Against Apartheid project, and then my assistant over here, Simone, aspiring graduate student, and then also Candace Alcaway, an aspiring law student, sorry. Let me just say that I am proud to continue this legacy and then to continue to make the connections in the struggle. One of the major projects that we have underway at this time is the America's Voices Against Apartheid exhibition, which recently was in Baltimore at Baltimore City Hall. And then we also is currently on exhibition right now. It opened at the Apartheid Museum, and then it's now on exhibition at the Pietermaritzburg, the capital of KwaZulu-Natal Museum in South Africa. So we're continuing to tell that story of the interconnection of South Africa, of their liberation struggle, and our own civil rights struggle, which I don't need to say this because we now know that the struggle continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey, for those wonderful remarks and the way you framed the discussion we are about to experience. Professor Ziad Matala, I see, he's right over here. It's funny, when I, tapped him on the shoulder and said, would you be a part of this special event? Justice Sachs is going to be here. And Professor Matala said, yeah, I was just texting with him. Yeah, I'll be there. Just that relationship and the warmth of that relationship is something that we knew would enhance this conversation. I want to say a few words about my colleague, Professor Matala, before he comes up and maybe engages in conversation with Justice Sachs. He is a distinguished legal scholar and a professor here at the Howard University School of Law. He's a native of Durban and was deeply involved in the country's liberation movement and has since dedicated his career to advancing constitutional law and international law. Before he joined us here at Howard, he taught at Northwestern and also at Chicago-Kent College of Law, and served as director of the Comparative and International Law program at UWC. He is a co-author of Constitutional Law Analysis and Cases and has published extensively on human rights and constitutional law. His expertise continues to shape global conversations on justice, governance, and legal reform. Professor Matala.
Good evening, friends, colleagues, students. It's an honor to say a few words about my friend and one of South Africa's great moral and intellectual lights, Justice Albie Sachs. Justice Sachs' story is inseparable from the long arc of South Africa's struggle for freedom. As a young advocate, he defended those charged under apartheid laws, knowing full well that the courtroom itself was an instrument of oppression. And for that courage, he was detained, put into solitary confinement, and eventually forced into exile. Even in exile, he was not safe. In 1988, apartheid operatives tried to assassinate him. They placed a bomb in his vehicle, as a consequence of which he suffered serious visible injuries, as you can see. He lost his one arm, he lost his eyesight in one eye. Yet what emerged from that horror was not bitterness, but an even deeper faith in the possibilities of humanity. Justice Sachs returned to South Africa in the early 1990s, following the unbanning of the liberation movements. He joined the constitutional team that gave birth to our interim constitution, that remarkable bridge, if I might say, a precursor to our final constitution, that birthed South Africa from an authoritarian system to a democratic dispensation. And he helped infuse that document with the spirit that would animate our final constitution. A spirit not merely of rights, but of reconciliation, of human dignity, of Ubuntu. In 1994, he was appointed among the first justices to the newly created Constitutional Court by President Mandela, and he would serve 15 years, giving life and language to those ideals. I would invite our students to take a look at some of the opinions that Justice Sachs penned. They are more than legal opinions. I'm going to say, Albie, I hope I'm using the right word. They are essays in moral imagination, where he speaks about the Constitution as a bridge between the paths of deep divisions and injustice. He speaks about a future founded on human decency. He talks about equality, not about uniformity, but about recognizing the humanity of others. And elevating this principle of human dignity. I was talking to Albie earlier on and telling him, and really applauding him and thanking him for the values that he and his fellow justices instilled in terms of what the South African Constitution meant. And I think it has enormous relevance for our current situation, particularly in this country. This idea that every government action has to be evaluated against the effects on human dignity. A very, very profound principle, enshrined by Justice Sachs and the other justices on the Constitutional Court from the very inception of the Constitution. This idea that every government action, and again this has extreme salience for our current reality in the United States, every government action has to be supported by the principle of rationality. Simply because you are in a position of power, it doesn't give you the authority to do certain things. Those of you that know Albie will tell you that his presence fills a room, not because of power, not because of position, but because of warmth, humor, and a conviction that justice, like love, is a practice. I'm going to tell you a story. I was walking with him one day to his house. Albie, you might not want me to share the story, but sorry, I'm going to do it. And there was a sign there saying trespassers will be prosecuted, with a picture of someone with a gun. And Albie took a picture of a bouquet of flowers and put it over that gun and relayed that story to me. Today we are extremely lucky to have with us a person of immense public contribution, a conscience that has guided South Africa. Justice Sachs, in his litany of judgments, reminds us that a constitution is not a monument but a living promise, one that demands of each generation the courage to imagine a better, a kinder, and a more equal South Africa. Albie has taught in our South Africa program that we ran for 23 years, at least on 3 occasions. And when I say he taught in our program, I'm not talking about an occasional guest lecture. I'm talking about spending 4 to 5 weeks with our students, giving off at least 28 hours of his time, talking about the South African Constitution. And in my office, I have testaments by various students in terms of that life-changing, edifying experience. To be able to learn from an expert infused with humanity, infused with a deep passion and sense of human rights and justice. And those testaments pretty much attest to that enriching and life-changing experience of many of the students. Albie and Vanessa, it's really a pleasure to welcome friends whose life and work have really embodied the moral architecture of our democracy. It's wonderful to have you at our law school. Albie, a student asked a couple of moments ago, where did I meet you for the first time? And I reminded you that we met in Chicago in 1991 when we were talking about the contours and the content of a future constitution for South Africa. And in 1991, you came with, and those were your words, and I don't know if you remember, the A-team of the African National Congress. And I think that's a fitting description, because we're talking about the late Dana Umar, first Democratic South Africa's Minister of Justice. We're talking about Zola Skweyiya, Louis Skweyiya, who served with you on the Constitutional Court, Arthur Shaskleton, who was there for a brief but not for the entire period of time, our first Chief Justice, Bulelani Njuka, the first National Director of Public Prosecutions. Can you tell us about those deliberations and what you learned from that early discussions that we had? And I remember you telling me, almost in scolding voice, that you hope I was not one of those individuals that was against the Bill of Rights. And I don't know where you came from with that idea when we first met.
Okay, I've promised a microphone.
I think they could hear him without it, right?
If you want to. I don't know, can you check this?
Just before I respond to that, is it working?
They can hear you in the back.
Okay, just to let you know, I'm a contrarian. I love swimming upstream. In apartheid South Africa, that meant being part of a revolutionary struggle. Now things are a little bit different. But so many people say, I'm humbled to be invited to do this, that, and the other. I'm not humbled. I'm feeling fantastic. I'm feeling great. I'm just the opposite of humbled. And it is special for me to be at Howard University, because this university has played such a role in the United States of America, fighting for the promise of the Constitution, fighting intellectually, fighting in the streets, people being locked up, arguing, debating in the courts. It's a big moment for me, and I feel enthralled to be here with you. I'm also delighted to be with my friend Ziad and with my other friend Charlotte. We came to the US of A, we were invited by the State Department. And at that stage, they were telling us they want to help level the playing field between ANC liberation movement on the one side and the South African regime on the other. They had a whole building, a 9-story building, 70 employees. They had all the constitutions of the world on disk, on floppy disk. And they knew nothing about constitutions. So I said, if you want to level the playing fields, help the government. We had lived everywhere. We had suffered every form of deprivation. In our exile, we'd lived in East Germany and West Germany, in Canada and Cuba, in the Soviet Union, in the United States, all over Africa. We saw countries at first hand. We saw sometimes people that fought hard for freedom nobly, been to jail, been in the trenches, they get into power, and then something goes wrong. Accumulating for their families, throwing opposition into jail. These weren't theoretical concepts. We had lived in the People's Republic of Mozambique. I was there for a long time. It was an amazing time, revolution, transformation, and change, but also seeing the problems and civil war, a lack of space for opposition. We'd seen all of these things at first hand. In any event, we were only too happy to visit the US of A. Laid on, even though it was by the State Department of the United States that hadn't been supportive of our liberation struggle. Okay, if they're coming in late in the day, better late than never. And it was quite an interesting tour, because one of the highlights, as far as they were concerned, was the Hoover Institute at Stanford University. And the moment we all remembered, far long after we'd forgotten others, was Chicago. It wasn't just there were brilliant people like Ziad there. It was Harold Washington. It was not long after Harold Washington became the first black mayor of Chicago, and people were still talking about him. And there was a phrase that he used in Chicago. He said, no one living in Chicago, whoever you are, will escape my justice and fairness. And in a sense, that was a motto for us, that we're looking to the new South Africa, and we're saying we're going to have a constitution for everybody, and even the oppressors will become ordinary citizens in our new constitution. They don't like it. They don't like being told by black people what the law's going to be. They don't like what's happening. They're not going to escape my fairness. So I remember that very, very vividly. I remember the energy of people now who'd been anti-government, anti-local authorities, anti any form of authority, had found themselves for the first time in government, in local government. And some of them couldn't make it. They were so used to being oppositional and fighting, to actually be in a position of authority was like too much for them. But it's a sort of a rehearsal for us, totally unexpected, of a kind of mental change that we ourselves would have to undergo. So I remember excellent discussions, but the main theme that came through to us was when you have progressive people now in charge of government, even just at the local level, the new challenges and the new possibilities and the new imagination that's required there.
Albie, when we look at jurisprudence in the United States, there is a strong strain among certain justices on the US Supreme Court that frowned upon looking at foreign precedent, as opposed to the Constitutional Court from the get-go. I guess the Constitution itself requires that. In terms of looking at foreign precedent, did you have an affinity for particular countries in terms of representing the values and where you felt the trajectory of the constitutional development should go?
It was very, very dramatic for us. I still remember our first meeting. We came from such different backgrounds. 4 had been judges under apartheid. They hated apartheid. They used what little space they had to try and soften the impact of the laws, to expose the torture, John Didcot and people like that. I'd been in the resistance, in the underground, exiled, blown up. It was rather melodramatic for a judge. Kate O'Regan and Yvonne McDougall had been law professors. Pius Langer had been a leading advocate, National Association of Democratic Lawyers. And Arthur Chaskelson, from being the top most desired lawyer in Johannesburg, gave up private practice to set up the Legal Resources Center. I was telling somebody today, modeled very much on the NAACP, bringing test cases even under apartheid. And now we have to establish a kind of commonality. We can't look at the jurisprudence of the old South African courts, even of the good judges. It was so embedded with the ethics of white supremacy, overt, expressed, not just in practice, in the law. In the law. You couldn't pass a transaction of a house. If I sold my house, I couldn't sell it to this guy. Why? Because I could only, being a white person, sell my house in a white area to a white person. And the deed of transfer had to say, being a white person, I'm the owner of the house and I'm selling it to a white person. If it didn't say that, it was an invalid deed of transfer, just to show you how detailed the laws were then. So even if there were some progressive interpretations, I remember in one case, there was a very intricate argument about onus of proof and so on, and I said, we can't, that section 25, that act that prevented black people from living in urban areas for longer than 72 hours, unless they'd been there for 10 years and 15. I said, you can't discuss the principled issue in that context of pure racism. So we couldn't use our own precedent. The Constitution encouraged us, required us to apply international law, unless there was a specific statute that went against it, and encouraged us to look at foreign law. And that wasn't hard for us. South Africa, to some extent, was a creation of the world community in the United Nations, international divestment, the crime against apartheid statute. So being birthed through that international pressure against racism meant we want to pick up those universal values. It wasn't an imposition from outside, it was a continuation of people struggling for freedom in their own country, but for freedom in South Africa. And we wanted to know, what are judges in other parts of the world doing, thinking? The first court that provided a kind of an imaginative impact was the Supreme Court of India. The Chief Justice of India, former Chief Justice of India, Bhagwati, came to South Africa, and Sodi Sarabji, the prosecutor general, came to South Africa. And there was an elan, a spirit, a beautiful use of language in a sort of meaningful, poetic way. Not just technical arguments and formulae and principles that had to be stitched together. It came from that sense of human dignity. So that was very influential in terms of the imagination, and the court being available for test cases, for class action, for what's called epistolatory jurisprudence. Prisoners would write on a scrap of paper, semi-literate, instead of your documents that had to be so many words per page with big margins and in quadruplicate typed. This would be epistolary jurisprudence. So that was one very important source for us. In terms of doctrine, I'm going to ask you to guess which country, which court do you think we found ourselves examining the most? You're not allowed to answer that one. Anybody?
The U.S. Supreme Court? U.S. Supreme Court?
US? No? No. Partly because the US Constitution, the Bill of Rights, from the late 18th century, early 19th century, doctrine being developed, and we had key concepts we had to deal with. Proportionality. How many of you know about proportionality? It's hardly taught in the United States. People actually resist the idea. A right is a right, and it's either protected or it's not protected. It's all classification. Proportionality is contextual. It all depends on the context, the meaning, purpose of interpretation. It required, from a technical point of view, a revolution in thinking. That was number one. Number two, the US Supreme Court had been a source of huge inspiration from Brown versus Board of Education. I remember I was a law student then, and it fitted in with the anti-colonial movement in Africa, which was part and parcel of a worldwide rejection of racism. It registered. Wow, you know, a court can have that role. And it didn't get there through technical reasoning. It had to actually destroy the technical reasoning that justified separate but equal. It got through the emphasis on human dignity. So it became a kind of a model. When I first came to the US in 74, it was like weird. On Monday I was a terrorist, I couldn't come to this country. On Tuesday I was no longer a terrorist because the anti-apartheid people in Washington were more powerful than the pro-apartheid people. So I came for the first time. It was a very exciting time to be here. The civil rights movement had been strong, the civil rights laws had come in, the women's movement was getting going. There was an energy and an optimism. And the idea of the courts now being at the forefront of change, not lagging long behind. That spirit was very, very strong. But by 1990, the balance was changing. And so you wouldn't get a concerted, strong majority view in favor of the emancipatory project, which was our project in South Africa. So we got a lot of help from the US Supreme Court, but increasingly from the minority positions. I'll throw out another question to you. Who were the two US Supreme Court judges that Albie Sachs cited the most often?
Is that can you just that David Marshall?
Thurgood Marshall.
No, I did cite him, but not all that often. And I've kind of given you a clue. William Brennan.
Yes.
And it's not that I was looking for binding precedent, for legal philosophy. And only if he could say it better than I could say it. So there are outcomes. I loved Ruth Bader Ginsburg's outcomes. But there weren't those resonant phrases and expressions. Brennan somehow found that language that helped us with our Constitution. Whatever the American Constitution said, a kind of philosophy and approach that was very helpful. And the other one was Robert Jackson. And I love saying in American law schools, one reason he was such a good legal stylist was he never went to law school. He had knocked it out of him. You could qualify then without going to law school, and he hadn't got a law degree. And there's a freshness and a vitality and a sparkle that would make my judgments, my opinions have freshness and sparkle. So we got a lot of benefit from there. The court that was the most valuable, and I might say the American Embassy gave us Larry Tribe's book, which is a brilliant piece of legal writing that picked up on that surge of progressive thinking, anti-racist, anti-sexist, kind of free speech, but not like free speech that can injure and harm and destroy people, very valuable. The other court was the Canadian Supreme Court. And the timing for us was very good. They got a Bill of Rights in 1982. And the reason they got it was Pierre Trudeau, French-speaking, was worried about Quebec nationalism. And he wanted to enable the people of Quebec to feel part of a larger Canada. And the way to do that was through a Bill of Rights that encompassed the whole of the country. And it actually did have that impact. And they picked up on the basic idea that your Bill of Rights sets out a number of protected rights, very expansive in our case, and then allows for limitations that are reasonable, justifiable in an open democratic society. And that's where proportionality comes in. You've got the right, government takes action because there are broad societal interests involved that need protection. Has government gone too far? Could it have achieved its objectives with less intrusive, less invasive means? And that becomes the core of most constitutional adjudication in Latin America, in Japan, in Europe, and in South Africa, not in the US of A. And it also happened that they had great leadership in the Canadian Supreme Court. Brian Dixon and Bertha Wilson. Bertha Wilson had come from a left-wing Presbyterian family in Scotland, and she was a law librarian. She'd never actually practiced. A brilliant legal mind, a feminist, a clear thinker, and they established a whole methodology that was progressive and modern, and they kept saying, what does it mean to be a Canadian? And it was an ideal concept of a Canadian being somebody who welcomes immigrants coming in, who welcomes multi-faith society, who welcomes a diversity. They were shaping, if you like, an ideal concept when it came to speech and a whole range of other things. We found that enormously helpful. And then there was a textbook by, oh gosh, the name will come back to me. A guy actually from New Zealand who set that out very, very well. We looked to the European Court of Human Rights, a little bit from Africa. Interestingly, Namibia was the source because Islam Muhammad had been on the court there, and Zimbabwe for a short time under Lubachena had some very, very good, useful judgments. The Bill of Rights became absolutely central to our constitutional project in South Africa. And maybe I ask you that question because for much of my legal life, I didn't like the idea of a strong Bill of Rights, which would give too much power to the judges. And I believed you fight in the streets for your rights and you fight in Parliament for your rights. Judges come from a conservative class, property-oriented, born into wealth and power, and against that. But when it came to looking at South Africa, the old apartheid regime was pushing very hard for group rights. And the way it was being projected in the world, the big constitutional question was how to protect minority rights of the whites. The whites who conquered the land, who seized the territory, who'd assumed all control and power in every different area, are now spoken of as a minority. So they were a numerical minority, but behaving as a majority. And you protect their rights, you're protecting all the accumulated wealth and power of centuries of dispossession. So so we had to combat the idea of focusing on the rights of the minority. And it was seen, even our friends were saying, you know, you can't expect the whites to lay down their guns unless you give them protections. Even our friends were saying that. And already in exile, when the Constitution Committee was set up in 1985 by Oliver Tambo, who was the law partner of Nelson Mandela, it was Paulo Jordan, one of our great intellectuals, who was asked by Tambo, one day we're going to have to negotiate. We've got to be ready. What's our vision? What kind of country do we imagine? And Paulo said, our answer, we can't have group rights. Right until negotiation, 91, 92, the old regime was arguing for 3 presidents. We would have had Mandela on Monday, de Klerk on Tuesday, Buthelezi on Wednesday. It's actually going to be 1 year, 1 year, 1 year, each representing a different national ethnic group. And they'd rule by consensus. Can you imagine the chaos? And of course that would be wonderful for the whites, because with Buthelezi siding with the whites, they would have had a majority. And Paulo said our answer is a Bill of Rights. And ANC had a Bill of Rights in 1923. 1944, at the time of the Atlantic Charter between Roosevelt and Churchill, setting out their vision of a post-Hitler world, the ANC was saying, what about us? What are we going to get after Hitler's gone? And they had African claims, which included a Bill of Rights. 1955, we adopted the Freedom Charter, which was a vision, like a Bill of Rights. And he said, that's our answer. We've got to have majority rule on a completely non-racial basis, non-racial elections, and people are protected, not because they're majority or minority or black or white or brown or Zulu speaking, because they're human beings. And that was long before the Berlin Wall fell. Gorbachev was just beginning to emerge. It was our own internal thinking. So I saw that that was, for me now, the right answer. That was the right answer. And I became a convert. And like many converts, I was now super pro-Bill of Rights. So I get sometimes the praise or the blame for introducing the Bill of Rights into the ANC. It was actually the other way around, that the ANC persuaded me to have a Bill of Rights. And I'm just going to conclude this little presentation. If you look at our Constitution today, it sets out a value system at the beginning, before the institutions. A strong, pungent preamble, locating that Constitution, that technical document about governance in our history, in our pains, in our aspirations. Then it's got a section called Foundational Principles, which includes the supremacy of the Constitution, fundamental human rights, non-racism and non-sexism. Only constitution in the world to include non-sexism, and then multi-party democracy with open and accountable government. And then a very expansive Bill of Rights that includes the rights not only of ordinary race, color, creed, to have non-discrimination, but not to have discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation. I see the flag up there. 1996, overwhelmingly black parliament, putting that in as a foundational right. No discrimination on grounds of disability in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, on marital status, on birth. Very strong gender sensitivity all the way through. There's no clause, rights for women. We were told, why rights for women? Aren't women voters? Aren't women workers? Aren't women everywhere? Which includes the right in the Freedom Clause not to be subjected to violence from the state or private sources, and includes the right to bodily integrity, including the right to make choices about reproduction. 1996, overwhelmingly black parliament adopting that constitution. So then those first whole sections, almost a third of the constitution, is the value system. And it's like a reminder that government must function in terms of that value system, and it gives a huge role to the Constitutional Court. And so the selection of the court becomes important, creation of a Judicial Service Commission, public involvement, etc., etc., etc. And the reason I feel an enduring core confidence that we're going to make it in South Africa with all the difficulties we have, overwhelmingly inherited with the deep structures of apartheid, the problems we've made for ourselves, and serious failures of governance, and even criminality that's been involved, that the Constitution is entrenched, it's got strong institutions, we've got a very good court. I've been off for a long time now, so I'm not patting myself on the back. Okay, and signs are going up, quick, Q&A.
Okay, let's take some questions from the students. Yeah, and your handlers? Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Thank you, Professor McDougall. Thank you. Thank you so much, Justice, for being here, and thank you all. This is such an honor. As I was reading your bio, if I could be as amazing as you fighting for rights, I have accomplished everything. So I have a few questions that I wanted to ask. One of them is, as a young lawyer defending Black South Africans under apartheid, what was the most difficult part of practicing in an unjust system?
There were two difficulties of a different order. The one was capital punishment. And my very first case was a murder case. A woman had had a fight with her husband. She'd gone to the kitchen, taken a knife and stabbed him. And I'm convinced she's going to be hanged. The judges would appoint young lawyers to defend on the basis of nobody should be hanged if they haven't had legal defense. And we just out of university and we should get experience. So you start off with murder. And if you're really good, you graduate to commercial crime and things of that kind. They were just horrible. You felt your client's life depends on you. The weight of it, it was gruesome. And the racism, it's everything depended on the race of the perpetrator and the victim. White on white, no, they use a horrible term, a swinger. The news. No, not a swinger. White on black, not a swinger. Black on black, not a swinger. Black on white, you're in capital punishment territory. That was the one. The other was we had to battle all the time against a parliament that issued one racist law after the other. And you'd win a little battle here and there. You know, when the Brown and Board of Education came out, it was 1954. In that very year, or 1955, South African Parliament passed a law saying that local authorities are not obliged, when they segregate facilities, to make them equal. The total opposite. Separate but unequal was expressly permitted because we had got some applications of the segregation law struck down because the whites got so much more than the blacks, so to prevent even that. And we had to be smarter than the other side. But by 1950s, we won all our cases. In the 1960s, we lost all our cases. Then we were just fighting as an advocate to save someone from the death sentence, to expose torture, to get 10 years imprisonment instead of 20 years imprisonment. It was very, very heavy, very, very hard.
Thank you for that. And to follow up with, your comments about young lawyers having to defend and having to be smarter than the other side and yet struggling in a system. In America, we as future lawyers and as practicing attorneys ourselves are battling with a system that seems to want to go back to those times. What advice do you have for me, first of all, as a law student, but also us as lawyers working in a world that is becoming even more unjust?
Normally when I'm asked what advice would I give to young people today, I say the only advice I'd give you is not to listen to the advice of old people like us. And be as irreverent and cheeky and challenging as we were. But I can't slip out of what you're saying there. It's very important that you're not on your own. You just got to work with teams. It can be a team in your office. It can be an association you belong to. You give each other support, you help each other, and technical support, and strategic support, but it's also moral support to feel less lonely. And strategy is very, very important. We abolished jury trials in South Africa. I actually argued in 2 cases with jury, only white men in the jury. And when it came to our new constitution, if you take in a poll in South Africa, say 30 million people voting, 29,999,999 would have said do away with juries. One person was favored, that was me. The idea was that juries would split on racial grounds. I actually thought juries could be a huge development of a national consciousness in the sense of whatever your background, you can be looking for fairness. And crime hurts everybody. You want to get prosecutions. At the same time, brutal state conduct is also something in juries. I think it could have been, like our rugby team is fantastic, but I was in a total minority there. So you're now arguing purely with judges, and sometimes you're preparing for the appeal. You know the judge at the local level. And I know people working in the South in the 50s knew they didn't stand a chance in the local areas. They had to prepare a record for the appeal later on. These are strategic things. And choosing, if you want to challenge something, choosing your case well. The facts shouldn't make any difference to the principle, but they do make a difference. When it came to denialism on the part of our government in relation to HIV/AIDS, it was absolutely tragic. Tens of thousands of people were dying. Their lives could have been saved if they had antiretrovirals. A huge movement on the ground, treatment action campaign. Ordinary people living with the virus, clamoring for access to antiretrovirals, ARVs. Hundreds of thousands were involved. Very good journalists creating communication awareness. Well-chosen cases, well argued by sharp lawyers. And the case they chose couldn't have been stronger. It was the rights of women about to give birth, living with HIV. If they took the drug nevirapine, it would cut the transmission by 50%. And the government was saying we've got to try it out for administrative experience. for 2 years, only 2 sites in each province. The doctors wanted it, the women wanted it, the future of the rights of the children to be born required it, and I remember when our Chief Justice, Arthur Justison, read out excerpts of the judgment, dead silence in the court, and we had people wearing T-shirts, HIV positive, black, white, brown, young, old, it was like the nation, dead silence, and as we went through the curtains at the back, cheering started, and I started crying. And I was crying not just the weight of HIV, but to think, we're judges. When we read the Bill of Rights, we weren't even thinking about HIV, but we have the power now to help save the lives of so many people. But that was then a massive community action, creating a consciousness in the country, very well presented communications in terms of the issues, and then sharp legal focused presentation, not thump-thumping and so on. It had to be within the canons of legal argument, which could be very, very powerful in that regard.
Okay, so that is very helpful. As you know, lawyers sometimes, future lawyers, sometimes we are trying to figure out how to move forward in a world that just seems like it's changing around us. But I wanted to also ask, how do you see the role of forgiveness in national healing and personal resilience nowadays, with everything seeming to fall down and all of the hard work of our predecessors seeming to be unraveling? How do you see forgiveness and resilience?
Okay, I see there are 2 questions there.
Yes.
Things don't unravel all that much. There's a lot of disturbance. And for me, something that's absolutely essential is composure. Now, I've been a revolutionary all my life. I'm against composure because composure is like holding on to something rather than, I've been a disruptor all my life. But people seem to be floundering now, and sometimes in a state of panic and despair. And I see institutions that are deeply rooted, that were hard fought for over generations, that have deep historic meaning for millions, and there's a consternation and sometimes even a sense of panic. That's not going to get you anywhere. It's easy for me, I'm outside. I'm outside. So I think that's something that's very important. In terms of forgiveness, I don't use the word forgiveness, but maybe that's easy for me. I wasn't oppressed, I was a volunteer. And I knew when I volunteered to join a black-led struggle, we knew we'd go to jail. I didn't know I'd actually be blown up, but after my friend and colleague and comrade sister, Ruth First, was blown up, I knew I could be a target as well. So I don't feel like personally affronted at what happened. And I was actually telling my grandchild just a few months ago, he's aged about 8 now, 9, the best day of my life was the day I was blown up. He said, "What? Grandpa, but you lost your arm and a sight in one eye." I said, "It's the best day of my life. I'm in the struggle. And every day, every night, you're wondering, will they come for me? Will they come for me today? Will I be brave? They tried to kill me and I survived." I actually felt fantastic I'd survived. And I had a total conviction as I got better, my country would get better. I've only lost an arm. Now some people say that's the sign of an optimist. Okay, I'm an optimist. I only lost an arm, they tried to kill me. When I got a message when I'm recovering in London, the Mozambican doctors saved my life. They were amazing. My recovery was in London, and I was under an assumed name in case the security people tried to finish off the job for quite a long time. I even had someone from Scotland Yard. I spent my life running away from the police and now there's a Scotland Yard guy on my side at the London hospital. In the end, I get a note. It says, "Don't worry, Comrade Albie, we will avenge you." And I think eventually we're going to cut off the arms, we're going to blind in one eye. Is that the country we want? If we get freedom, if we get democracy, if we get the rule of law, if we get social justice, that will be my soft vengeance. Roses and lilies will grow out of my arm. And that theme of soft vengeance became the theme of my life. Writing a constitution for South Africa, helping to write soft vengeance. Voting as an equal for the first time, soft vengeance. Becoming a judge to defend those things we were fighting with soft vengeance. To build our new court building on the site of the old Fort Prison, where both Gandhi and Mandela were locked up. We bragged that we have the only prison in the world where both Gandhi and Mandela was locked up. No one else can claim that. That's soft vengeance. To fill that court building with beautiful art, of artists from all over, that's soft vengeance. It's not forgiveness, it's transcendence. It's the triumph of the things you were fighting for. That gives meaning. That gives meaning. I even met the guy who organized the bomb in my car. He went to the Truth Commission and he met me afterwards and he said, "Albie, you said maybe we'll meet one day." And I said, "Henry," which is his name, "I've only got your face to tell me what you're saying is the truth." I put up my hand, I shook his hand. I almost fainted, actually. He went away being he was at a party, but I heard afterwards he went home and he cried for 2 weeks. I don't know if it's true. I want to believe it's true. I'm not even checking up because maybe it's not true. But it's more important that this man who'd been a killer, an assassin, cried because of the failure of everything he'd been involved in. And he cried because I wasn't shouting at him. You know, I was seeing him now, we're in the new South Africa together, make your contribution, acknowledge what you've done, help with the security for the new South Africa, that would be more important. So, he never asked me for forgiveness, and I'm glad he didn't. How can you say, "Sorry, I blew off your arm"? He went through the processes that our society created. We didn't want trials that would drag on forever. Where do you get the evidence? So much in secrecy. You have to get some of the criminals to denounce the others who give them amnesty. So we agreed on amnesty for telling the truth coming forward. And it wasn't necessary for the victims, for the family, to say, "I forgive you." It was a different kind of a process. Other people, for Desmond Tutu, who headed the Truth Commission, forgiveness is central to his Christian vision. I'm very secular. I love Desmond Tutu, he loved me. We came to it through different routes, different framing of the philosophy. But it was a magnanimity on the part of the majority black population. But a magnanimity that's not just good heart, it made sense. Their skills, they could sabotage, they could undermine. And we wanted our young people to live together and work together and play together and destroy racism. We saw that as a victory. When we got the former kidders to come into Parliament, that was a victory because they're now accepting majority rule, accepting our values. I wish I could say South Africa had achieved the harmony, the justice, the fairness that we envisaged and we fought for. We haven't. It's still a very unfair society. Whites are still overwhelmingly better off. But better that, even that, it's slow, but it's happening. There are thousands and thousands of graduates now, from not only from law schools, but from engineering and architecture and science, coming from all the communities. We are making a lot of progress, but inequality is still there. We're not a safe society. You know, you worry about walking in the streets, you worry about locking up your house, locking your motor car. But we are an open society. We know what's going on. We denounce, people speak their minds. And something that pleases me very much is one of our biggest growth industries is stand-up comedians. And it says a lot about the society. And I'm just going to end this a little bit by one of our comedians from the black community. Different communities have different flavors of humor based on experience and culture. He said just recently that South Africa has been a country of firsts. We had the first in the world heart transplants. And now we have the first refugees that fly on chartered aeroplanes, are received in the host country with open arms, put up at hotels and given jobs immediately.
That is a great place to end, in that we are seeing the circle come around all the way. But I want to say thank you so much for your presence. It is an honor to get to talk to you. It's an honor to have you and my fellow students feel the same way. We're grateful to you. Thank you.
Just, if we don't mind, one more round of applause for Justice. We just have a couple of gifts here for you, Justice Sachs, on behalf of Howard University School of Law. I believe we're all in the right place at the right time for all of the right reasons, and we're better for it and having heard your conversation today. And we want to say thank you.
So Albie has some gifts for you all too. Okay. So this logo is from a mural that was painted in Mozambique, and Albie was very involved with the artists in Mozambique. And currently in South Africa at the Zeitz Museum of Contemporary Art Africa, there's an exhibition called Spring is Rebellious, the art and life of Albie Sachs. And so if it's on for a whole year. If you get to make it there, that would be great. In Cape Town, yes. The other thing we'd like to give you, I hope it didn't get all squashed and creased. It's very hard. It's this document on special parchment paper, written in the font that was especially designed for the Constitutional Court. See it? Can you say what it is? Yeah. It's the preamble to the South African Constitution that also starts like yours with "We the People." Albie will sign it. We printed these as gifts for people. But Albie turned 90 in January, on the 30th of January. Yes, he's 90. And there's one more item, I think. This is the book for your library. We didn't bring a lot of Albie's legal writings, but we somehow did manage to bring this. And the image on the I think it's this one. Anyhow, the image on the bag is in here somewhere. There it is. Yeah, there it is. Okay. And Albie was involved in the printing of that book. And the last little thing, I don't know who's going to have a bun fight over these little things, is a little pouch for pencils or whatever. And they've done this as part of the paraphernalia that they sell in the museum while the exhibition is on. And this is a quote by Albie, but it's an extract from, I don't know, some of you might not have noticed in the beginning, before the, I was going to say Chief Justice, before the Dean started speaking, there was a scrolling of a video. And it is a collection that we have built called the Albie Collection. And somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was Ziad, who said there's some wisdom to be had from Albie, not quite in that phrasing, but Albie had written 65 legal opinions, and we had filmed Albie in conversation with a young lawyer, discussing in dialogue with each other all these legal cases, setting out the issue, the context, the implications for South Africa, and Albie speaks about the tick-tock ticking of the legal brain, legal mind, bringing about a decision. And there are 70 of those little videos, 15 minutes. Very useful for teaching. They might not all be relevant for law in Ziad, I'll send you the links, I'll share the links. Yeah, and they're very useful to just listen and get a feeling, and you understand that actually the law is not completely objective. There's another subjectivity in decision making. So that's a special gift that we created for Albie for his 90th, and he's kind of gifting it to the world. So anyhow, these are just a few little. This says, by their nature, human rights belong to all humanity, not to any single continent. Yes. Okay, so that's all for you. I don't know how to handle it. Maybe we put it all inside the pouch, and then Albie, you can pretend to stand and hand over the pouch. And I'll take this from your hands.
Okay, then the first guy is the dean's for here.
No, but there's an assistant dean.
Thank you.
Okay.
Pleasure.
Three. One. Three.
Yes. Okay. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I realize I have some of these bookmarks which we created with a QR code that takes you to the collection when you scan it. If they're not enough, just share them around. Stick one on a notice board. People can just scan it.
Pretty good.
Excuse me. Oh, and I just wanted us to one more time. Quick round of applause for Justice briefly as we head out, I hope we can all remember the lessons that our legacy leaves behind with us. Remember that we're all a part of this community. Remember that we're not looking simply for forgiveness, but we're hoping to be the tranquility that we can see, the transcendence, excuse me, the transcendence that he preached. Hopefully carry that along with us and bring that as future lawyers, current academics, and members of society to make each and all of our community a better place here and abroad.
You heard that? You heard me? Yes. I know, like, okay. I was trying to think. I think I know who you're talking about. He's a model. He's very skinny. I think it was more so. I think that's just right. I don't know. I've never seen her. I'm more. I forgot about her. She's so familiar that I don't know. Let me get some pictures. I'm sorry. So, like, maybe I'm almost done. I just need to get
Oh my God.
we can start shutting down at this point.